to recording in progress. Excellent. Okay, welcome folks. My name is Abram Dickerson. I'm here representing Aspire Adventure Running as part of our spring training community. It's a real pleasure to have Derek Dalzell with us from COROS, who's going to be chatting with us really about data and analytics. Our coach Andrew is traveling, but we'll be tuning in. He's getting off a plane. He's going to jump in and tune in. So our outline for tonight looks like hearing from Derek, then some Q&A regarding his presentation, and then we'll cut him loose because he's on East Coast time and he wants to go to bed, and we support rest and recovery. And then folks can stick around. We'll do questions with Andrew. And this time we're going to make sure that Derek returns the host handle back over so we don't end our webinar right in the middle of a sentence. So that's our big goal for tonight. Cool. Well, Derek, I'm going to make you the host now, Derek, which will give you the ability to do that. I'm really excited for your presentation. Largely this is just personal interest, but I've got a watch, I've got a COROS watch. It collects data and I look at it sometimes, but it doesn't really inform what I do. So I'm really curious to learn more about how these analytics and support my training and prep. Okay. And with that, it's all you.
If I hit play here okay, perfect. You guys can still see that, Abram?
Yep, it's coming through.
Okay, awesome. So hey guys, happy to be here and talk through data and analytics, representing COROS Wearables. Started working with COROS in late August when they started really making a push for the Training Hub, which I will talk about here in a little bit. But just some quick background on me. Played athletics my whole life, played D1 baseball, finished baseball, wanted to be competitive in something. And endurance athletics just really grabbed me and said, this is what you're going to focus on. So started really getting into training properly straight out of college. And that led me to finding data and numbers. And I'm a numbers guy, and I love understanding the why behind something. So, probably a lot of the viewers tonight, you want to know more about how to make yourself better. And that eventually led me back to grad school and getting an advanced degree in sports performance, and then a CSCS cert, and have been coaching for 11 years. And now I work for COROS, and I have the best job in the world. I get to help athletes get better. So yeah, let's go through this here and see if we can't make you guys faster after this. So why data? Why? A lot of athletes are like, I just want to run to get out of the house, or I just want to go ride my bike and see new places. And I know how hard I pushed. And, for those athletes, I say that it sounds like exercise is a fantastic way for you to get out and enjoy yourself. And really that's one thing exercise should be for all of us. But if you are trying to get better, if you're trying to maximize your time outdoors, then you should measure it. And so the objective side of training is the data, because numbers are numbers and we can measure those. So with data, we can eliminate mixed feelings, right? Are you feeling tired? Are you not feeling tired? I don't know. Did I get enough sleep? Did I not get enough sleep? Does my boss need something from me at 5 p.m.? Is that a lot of stress? Is that not a lot of stress? Data provides us with an answer that is based off quantifying your training, and you can always find a yes or no to, can I push harder or can I not? So a lot of those questions that you have day in, day out, let your data start providing the insights for if you should be going outside or if you shouldn't. No guesswork on how many miles did you run? How much training stress did you put on your body? How fit are you? Abram, I'm sure you've probably showed up to a race and you're like, am I fit enough? Well, with data, yes, you will know if you're fit enough or not before you go to a race. Long-term trends, is this year's training better than last year's? Is this month's training better than last month's? Okay, I ran 50 more miles this month than I did last month, but maybe last month I was in Colorado and this month I'm in Kentucky. How do those balance out? Well, with data, we can figure that out. And then this is a part that I'm really passionate about. And data, I believe, creates smarter athletes. And so the more you start to understand what numbers mean for you, the smarter you become in your training, but more importantly, in your racing. So like as a coach, I have a lot of talks with athletes. I have a lot of talks with my colleagues and just a lot of individuals overall like yourself, you know, and I can talk to you guys right now and I can give this webinar and it's fantastic and that's great, but you are going to be in a race. You are going to be at mile 12 of a marathon. You are going to be at mile 70 of an ultra. You are probably going to have over 100 decisions throughout your next race that you have to decide, should I do this or should I do that? Should I do X or should I do Y? And the more you start to understand the data in your training, the better your decision-making gets in races. And so what I find is once athletes really start buying into data and wanting to know more about how their body operates and what the numbers mean, they start making one better decision in a race. The next decision is better. The next decision is better. And all of a sudden it's that snowball effect, right? By the time you get to the finish line, you just knocked 15 minutes off your marathon because you made better decisions throughout the race, because you're a smarter athlete, because you know what your body is going through and what the numbers mean. So like, I'm probably most passionate about educating people about data, but if you really like take the time to understand what it means for you, you will get faster just by making better decisions. So COROS, right? Like, you know, that's who we're representing today. So I'm going to talk a lot about COROS, the ecosystem, because that's the ecosystem I work in, and that's where my athletes are at now. So how do I track data in the COROS ecosystem? It's really easy. All you need is a watch, and the watch does everything. It's really cool. So you just have to hit start. You got to go run. You got to go ride. You got to go lift, whatever you're going to do. Hit stop, and then let the Evo Lab track that for you. So the Evo Lab it's something that a lot of new users are like, oh, I'm not getting all the data. COROS watches have to learn who you are as an athlete before we start pushing more advanced metrics to you. So for a lot of new runners, it's somewhere between 5 to 7 runs of 5 to 10K. If you went out and ran a marathon the first day after you got your COROS unit, you would probably unlock it just because it's a lot of data coming in. But just know it takes about 25 to 50K of running, because what the watch is doing is it's figuring out your heart rate and your pace and how those two work together to produce your VO2, your lactic threshold, all those things. Once your Evo Lab is unlocked, you can find that in one of 2 places. So every COROS user has an app. So that's actually how you unlock your watch when you first buy it. So in the app, you get really quick, easy data access, quick insights of, maybe checking it every 1, 2, 3 days of, oh, what's my VO2? What's my marathon level? But the app is just for quick insights. The COROS Training Hub is what we spend a lot of time on in Q4. And so we launched that late December 2021, early January 2022. And that's where the more robust analytics are. That's where coaches can use the platform to work with athletes. That's where athletes can plan their workouts. It's a full-on coaching software, but we provide it for free for all of our users. COROS is really big about adding value to our existing athletes. So the Training Hub, just like a lot of our feature updates, is free. And I'll touch on that in a little bit. So heart rate and pace zones, and this is kind of going to be like the first layer. So for everybody watching, like, there's going to be different layers as we go through this. This is the first layer. So heart rate and pace zones, what I love about COROS is that we calculate these for you automatically. So Abram, if you started as a 25-minute 5K and over 6 months, you got down to a 20-minute 5K or a 22-minute 5K, whatever it is, your pace zones will adjust automatically based on your training. A lot of platforms, you have to go in and like change your zones, change your settings. We just change on the fly based on your training and your actual data coming in. Training load is calculated from these settings, from these zones. I'm going to talk about training load in the next slide. But training load is kind of that next layer to the onion of importance here. So we're starting with heart rate and pace zones, and then everything comes from there. All you have to do is just hit start, go run, and let us crunch the data for you. So training load, and this is the base foundation. This is what all of the advanced metrics that we'll talk about later come back to. And so this is where I was talking about earlier. You were running in Colorado, right? Then you're running in Kentucky, or you're running in North Carolina, or wherever you are. Maybe you're running in Hawaii and it's really hot and humid. Training load is a way to quantify the stress on your body from each workout. Okay. And you can find this on every workout you do with COROS. So it'll be a training load number attached to it. All right. And so this is a great way for you to compare workouts against each other, compare cycling against running, running against lifting. And I know those are different and they have totally different outcomes, but we can still quantify the stress it put on your body while doing those activities. All right. And so these daily training loads will populate these larger trend metrics that I'll talk about later on, which are base fitness, load impact, and fatigue. Okay. So training load, this is, if you're going to get into data and you're not into it yet, start with training load. This is kind of like the foundational piece. So this is a quick snapshot of what the Training Hub looks like. And so for all users, if you went to training.coros.com, if you're a COROS user, you will have your own account that you'll sign into. And from there, you'll have your dashboard with all of your quick insights. Evo Lab metrics is a little bit more robust. The workout list is going to allow you to analyze workouts, which I'll show you how to do later. And then the calendar is where you plan workouts and something really cool that I'll touch on here in just a sec. So like I said, you have the dashboard, Evo Lab metrics, workout lists, and the calendar. The big note from this slide is that it is a free platform for coaches and users. We love providing value to our existing athletes and coaches. So we wanted to build this out to really create the full ecosystem overall. Okay, next layer in the onion, next piece here is, a lot of athletes, a lot of coaches that aren't used to data will get on the Training Hub, or they will look at the watch and be like, whoa, like this is a lot. Where do I, like, what data is important? Like what should I focus on? How do I actually get better? And so, something I learned pretty early on in coaching and through academics is like athletes can only focus on 3 cues in any session. So for all those watching the webinar, this is one of those cues. Okay. And these 3 charts are what I want you to take away from the webinar. One of those charts is base fitness. Okay. And so base fitness is a 42-day rolling average of your training load. It's a fantastic indicator of overall fitness. And essentially, if you're training the right way, as base fitness is trending up, your overall fitness is trending up as well. And so, it's also a great indicator of year-over-year training and what you're capable of. The second chart is fatigue. And so fatigue, as a lot of you know, is, it's how we quantify when you need to recover. Okay. So like if you're going into a build and you're ramping up, well, your fatigue is ramping up with you. And so as that fatigue gets higher and higher, and in the COROS ecosystem, really, anytime it goes over 75, you kind of want to start bringing things back a little bit. But anytime your fatigue starts to skyrocket, you can track that now with data, and you can know, okay, am I feeling tired just because, I don't know, I've been in the air conditioning all day and I'm feeling lethargic, or am I feeling tired because I just came off, a 700 training load week and my base fitness only supports a 500 training load week. Right. So you can start to quantify, okay, how tired am I from training? And again, that's going to indicate when you should recover. The last chart, which this is like athletes always want to know, oh, what's the secret recipe for success? The pace zone distribution chart is your secret recipe for success. I promise. If you understand the demands of your race, you can make sure you're training properly and maximize your results. So as a coach of the last 11 years that, I've had the privilege of working with some talented athletes and, beginners, and the entire spectrum. These are the 3 charts that I use day in and day out. I use year to year. If an athlete won a national championship in 2017, you better believe I'm looking at their base fitness from 2017 and trying to replicate that in 2022. Okay. So these 3 charts, I always find myself going back to make sure, are we on the right track? Are we recovering enough? And are we specific in our training? So here's a snapshot of what base fitness and fatigue look like in the Training Hub. And so this is one of my colleagues who was racing the Houston Marathon, and we were working together. We both started in August at COROS, and we're like, man, let's put this to the test. Let's do it. So we started his ramp in September. And as you can see, the blue line here, the blue line is that's base fitness, and the orange is fatigue. Okay. But as he starts in September, right, we see a build in base fitness, as we should, because we're training for a big event. And so we're ramping up training. And I will tell you this, without base fitness and being able to quantify training, this guy lives in Colorado, by the way, but he flies all over the country for work and family and whatnot. But without being able to quantify training and compare altitude training versus sea level training in California and whatnot, like there would have been flat lines here in his base fitness. It's only from being able to track day in and day out and know, okay, I actually have to run more in California because my heart rate's not getting as high, or my pace is faster, or whatever it is. I actually need to run more here. And so we had this educated, this educational process, essentially this calculated decision to run more in different spots and eventually hit his peak. And then we tapered down into Houston. And for people looking right now, well, his fitness was higher before Houston. Why is that? Well, in order to taper properly and bring this orange fatigue down, you have to sacrifice some fitness for freshness. Okay. So what you'll find with a proper taper here is you'll actually see a spike, an overreach, kind of like an overreach period. And then he'll come down and he was actually racing at the same fitness he was in at about the beginning of December, but look how fresh he was compared to December, right? So he went there and he set a huge PR. Guy's really talented. He ran like a 2:48 as an age grouper with a full-time job and traveling all the time. So that was awesome. Then the next piece of this, right, is, well, a marathon that's a big build. So we want to recover. We don't want to just hang out up here, because that's kind of when you get stale and you hit that plateau. But we brought it back down. This was a calculated decision. We brought down his base fitness so he could recover, adapt from all the training. And now he's training for Leadville this summer. And so you can see that he's already started his second build. And this is going to continue to ramp up. And there might be some dips and valleys, right? Because like life happens, and that's fine. But we'll always know where we're at. And the really cool thing about this is we will know where he got to before. And we know this was a great day, right? So, let me go back. Sorry. So here's the question. And this is where the art of coaching, and this is where the athlete coach relationship, or you as an athlete trying to learn more about this, really need to think, okay, can I push higher than this peak? Can I go above that? I know what that felt like. Can I push my limits even more? Or was that really is that the most I can do? And if it was, that's fine. We had really good success with it. Let's try and replicate it. The 2 weeks prior to Leadville, again, let's try and replicate this peak, and then let's try and replicate the taper, because it worked once before. And so, this is it's such a cool insight to have, because athletes without data, if this guy didn't have data at the Houston Marathon, but somehow, some way, he trained exactly the same way, right? And he ran a 2:48 at Houston, he'd be thinking of Leadville like, okay, how did I do that? I'm probably just going to go run the exact same days every single. I'm just going to replicate my schedule exactly how it was, because it worked out well, right? Well, maybe the weather's not the same every day. Maybe he's not at the same location. Maybe work gets a lot harder and he can't replicate those same days. Maybe he has to travel and he can't hit the 26 miler on that one Saturday. But what's cool about this is just measuring stress on the body. And no matter where he's at and what's going on, we can figure out ways to put stress into his training to mimic this. So you can take really successful use cases and just roll that into the next one, or maybe push the limits even farther. Knowing this guy, we're going to push the limits a little bit farther because he wants a really good result. But guess what? If that goes really poorly, now we have data to show, hey man, this didn't work out. I know it was Leadville and that sucks to figure it out there, but at least we figured it out and we'll never make that mistake again. So this is just going to be kind of what I was touching on. I think the graph does a better way of displaying it, but going back here, this point right here creates a plateau in stale performance. What you'll find with a lot of athletes that they don't understand train load, they don't understand stress on the body, they don't understand how to periodize their training. You will just see a flat line of blue, like starting from February until November or something, right? And then the holidays, they take some time off, but then they ramp it back up. The more flat you see, it's not, I don't want to call them junk miles because there are some physiological adaptations taking place. But for athletes that care about performance and want to get faster, I will say you are not maximizing your training. And for all that time you spend outdoors or, doing whatever activity it is, like you're not getting the most out of it. Okay. So we could probably have, this webinar could be like 10 hours, but we are going to scale it down to 30 minutes. Okay. We could talk about periodization, this could be very long, but just know you should see peaks and you should see valleys in your base fitness. Don't have these long plateaus. Unless like you're an elite athlete and you have 3 key events in a 2-month phase. But if that's the case, then you're going to see a massive drop off after because you have to recover. But for most athletes, especially in ultra running or most big endurance events, like age group athletes, you generally pick 1, 2, maybe 3 big events a year. So this base fitness is a pretty good indicator of what yours is going to look like. These last 2 points here, just so you guys know, studies do show that yearly peaks and then off seasons show themselves in greater VO2 gains year over year. They've done countless studies on cross country skiers, either training throughout the entire season at the same intensity or having peaks and valleys. And while throughout the 1 year, there's not a huge difference. As you go year over year over year over year, the athletes that have the peaks and the valleys, they continually get better with their aerobic capacity. And then this last piece down here with base fitness and fatigue, and this is one thing that I love about the COROS Training Hub is you can actually start to plan your season properly with predictive analytics. Okay, so my next slide here is just a quick screen grab. But I think this is really powerful. And so for athletes watching this, know that you can go in. And so, this is all my past data from the last couple of months. But when I start putting training in the future, I get this dashed line that shows me what my fatigue and what my base fitness would be down the road. And so why that's so important, Abram, and for everybody listening, is if you had great success at 140 base fitness or 90 base fitness or 30 fatigue or whatever it is, right? You can start planning your weeks out to make sure that on your key event or your key day, you are at the base fitness you need to be at and at the fatigue you need to be at. You do not have to guess about your taper anymore. You can nail it down by just planning appropriately. So go into your calendar view in the training hub, create your workouts, a week, 2, 4 weeks in advance, and life happens. Like you can move things around as needed. And that's fine. Right. But at least set the foundation, like start to put the puzzle together of, okay, I need to do X, Y, and Z if I want to be at 130 base fitness by June. Or, I run a major event in July. I want to get up to 150 base fitness in June and then taper. So my fatigue is at 25 going into the event. Like you can plan this out. You don't have to guess. This is when athletes and coaches working with athletes really start to see big improvements, is when they lay things out in a realistic way. They start building confidence. Oh, I hit this week. I hit next week. I hit the following week. Confidence is sky high. Fitness is building. I know I'm going to taper. And all of a sudden, this data now has turned into a sports psychology tool, because when they get in the race, they have all this motivation of like, I got to race day with a perfect plan. I executed it. And guess what? Even if I didn't execute it perfectly, we switched things up and fixed it because we're tracking these things with data. So like, I know I'm as good as I can possibly be. I'm not slowing up at mile 21 of a marathon because it hurts. I'm going to push through because I know I'm ready for this. All right. So I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but data can really start to impact the psyche of athletes too, in a really positive way. It can also do it in a negative way. Again, that would be part of the 10-hour webinar. Okay. Last chart that I really want to focus on today. Pace zone distribution. All right. So specific training, again, remember, this is your secret recipe. Understand what the demands are of your event. Okay. Are you running an ultra? Well, you really need a lot of time at aerobic endurance, and you need to focus on muscular endurance. A marathon for sub-3 marathoners, just FYI, you should run almost all of it in your aerobic power or tempo zones. 400-meter athlete should really focus on their anaerobic capacity, and the 100-meter athlete should focus on their neuromuscular power. Okay. And so like, just understanding what energy systems your event demands and what physiological systems are at play, and what is my body going to be going through for 60 seconds? Like, what is it going to be going through for 3 hours? And once you start to understand, okay, this is the demand of this sport, this is the demand of this event, you can structure your training in a way to make sure that you're getting a lot of training in the proper zones. And so when you go into your build phase or your peak phase, right, that's kind of when specificity of training is king. That's when it's the most important. So this chart for athletes, right, like this chart to me, I really hope it's an ultra athlete. I think it is. I think it's my buddy, my colleague, because there's zone 1, zone 2 heavy, right? But in the case study that I'm going to talk about, I might show this chart again, but I work with like an 800-meter 1 miler, and the athlete has far more volume in zone 5 and zone 6. Okay. So when you take your base fitness, you take your fatigue, right? You're going to get a really good indicator of, am I building fitness? When you add this chart into it, that's when it really all comes together and you start building the right fitness. Okay. Don't try and only train one zone all year. You'll hit that same plateau I'm talking about. All right. But in your build and peak seasons, real like 8 weeks out, 8 to 10 weeks out, really start hammering that proper zone. Okay. I guess I'll throw a disclaimer in there. If your proper zone is like zone 4 or above, you can't do only zone 4 or above. That's a lot of stress on the body and your legs. But we can talk further. Feel free to message me if you have more questions about that. So workout analysis. So workout analysis is available in the workout list view of the Training Hub. And so every athlete now can essentially pull up their data from runs, rides, lifts, whatever it is, and analyze it at a far greater ability. And so what's really important with this is identifying that every athlete is different. Okay. So even if you go to, track run with your buddies or a track club or whatever it is, and the coach tells you to run, 2-minute 400s or a minute 3400s or whatever your interval is, doesn't really matter. And say you run it with 5 different people. Okay, that's great. You all are running the same split, but I promise you all got there in slightly different ways. One of you had a 182 cadence and a shorter stride length. The other one had a 170 cadence and a really long stride length. Okay. And so like how athletes function it's slightly different from every other athlete. So if you try and just lump yourself in with 100 other athletes, like you can build general fitness and you can build, you can build the proper specificity of training as long as you're hitting like the paces and heart rates and stuff. But when you're talking about maximizing everything that you have, and really trying to get to your pinnacle success, like the best you'll ever be, you need to start identifying metrics that are important to you, right? So like, what is your cadence? What is your stride length? What is your power? What is your left-right balance? And what does that mean? And how do I, if I'm a 180 cadence runner and I'm running an 800, and the last 200, my cadence falls off, like, well, maybe we should be working on cadence intervals instead of only focusing on pace ever, because pace is an outcome of cadence and stride length. So instead of only focusing on the outcome, what if we broke it down and we focused on the process, and we focused on the cadence or the stride length or whatever metric it is, right? And so, this webinar is about data. And essentially what I'm saying is data allows you to break down a movement and figure out where the discrepancy is, to why am I not running as fast as I want to run? It's somewhere in the metrics. Find it. It's somewhere in the data. And once you find it, you can cater your training around that. Without data, you have no idea. It's a guess. It's somebody saw you at track one day and said, hey, you're leaning to the left when you run. Okay. So, you know what I mean? It's just subjective. It's just hearsay. So know your strengths and your weaknesses. This was a really cool case study we did. If you guys want to get in depth with the case studies we've done, they're all on the COROS Training blog. If you go to coros.com and go to training, there's a training blog there. And so we did a case study with Matt Yates, who's a coach of the Run Yard, and he works with quite a few aspiring Olympic athletes and an Olympic athlete right now. And so they've been putting the COROS Training Hub to the test with the Pace 2s. And so for this athlete specifically, he's a 1500 meter athlete, but you can really see, this is really cool. You can really see the discrepancy between his cadence and his stride length. Even though his pace is staying pretty smooth, one drops off and one builds. And so I'm not going to get into it now, but you can really break that down further and start tweaking things to see if you can elongate that pace for further and further and further. And that's how you start breaking through those milestones. So here's a quick case study. We're nearing the end for everybody that's following, but I just want to show you kind of what you can do and what's of importance with data. But here's a quick case study. So this is an athlete, a high school athlete of mine that I've been working with for a long time, and we've been using data for like 7 years now. And he's an extremely smart athlete, and he knows what the data means and how to use it to his advantage. So, this is in the Training Hub. This is an analysis of a race he did. But the last part of data that I want to touch on today is you can take data from your key training sessions or your key races and figure out where the issue was, right? Like, where did I start losing time? So for a lot of my Ironman athletes, right, like somewhere around 4 hours on the bike is where people tend to start falling off or get a lot of heart rate drift, and you can identify that with data. For this athlete, in this specific example, he was told just to kind of sit in the pack for 2,200 meters because he has a very, very strong anaerobic endurance and aerobic capacity, kind of like where his aerobic capacity and anaerobic like meet is just very, very strong relative to the competition. So we know that's his strength. So any good athlete would race for their strengths, and you can identify those strengths with data, remember? So we were racing to his strengths because that's how we maximize our odds for a win. We sat in the field for 2,200, and then we kicked for the final K. The athlete did win, which is fantastic, right? But it's not all about winning. And this athlete really wants to challenge for the state championship. So we took this data and we said, all right, let's break this down further, because states is going to be faster. States is going to be faster than this. And so let's look at your last 1K. Let's look at what you did. Let's see what you did well. And now let's try and elongate out those metrics further and further and further, and basically start stressing those metrics. that pace zone distribution, right? In different ways. And so when he sat in the pack for 2,200 meters, he averaged 388 watts, 181 cadence, 429 mile. And that's good. That's great. That 1K surge though, he was able to lift the watts up to 400, 185 cadence, 425 mile. Here's kind of just a summary. But we looked at that 1K and we said, okay, buddy, like we need, instead of only focusing on pace at track practice, like I know your coach is having you run 800s and I know your coach is having you run mile splits and things like that. Like I know you have splits that you need to hit, but let's try and make up those splits, you know, in different ways. So for that athlete specifically, when he is kicking and running and like really maximizing his abilities, he's sitting at 186 to 190 cadence. When he starts to fade or just get lackadaisical, his cadence falls to like 180, 181. All right. And so for this athlete specifically, he's trying to set some really lofty records nationally. And so we have to build his cadence to his optimized pacing for those national records. So we have been doing a lot of intervals at 186 to 190, trying to build foot speed ahead of states, and also to you know, break records. And part of this, like I said in like the second slide, is this athlete now is aware that when his time starts to slip, his cadence is slipping. It's not his stride length. His stride length is good. His power is amazing. He's a very, very strong athlete. It's just he lets his foot speed dip, but he has the ability to lift it multiple times throughout. So all we're trying to do is just elongate out the time that he stays at this cadence. And so we put cadence on his watch face. He has a pace too. And so we put cadence on his watch face instead of pace. And you know, he's such a talented athlete that he knows what pace he's running because he's run for so long. But we are trying to get his splits now with a specific cadence to build that muscle memory, to build basically the neurons and how they're firing. But yeah, we're just changing how we hit these targets. And then for watts, you know, 440 watts for a mile, that's based off kind of some further analysis and things like that. But just instead of only focusing on pace or heart rate, right, we're taking that another layer. We're looking at data, we're looking at cadence, stride length, power, all these things, and we're having really, really good success. And you know, again, the pace zone distribution, this athlete spends a lot of time in zone 5, zone 6, so he doesn't really run a ton of miles. Right. He has his easy miles to make sure he is maintaining some volume, but he has a lot of focused training. And like I said, you know, quite a while ago, the focused training in the weeks leading up to your peak is really what allows you to hit your peak potential. So a quick overview, then I'm done. You guys don't have to listen to me anymore, but quick overview. So data allows you to create objective goals, right? You can track your progress. You can identify your strengths and weaknesses. And through all of that, you're going to start having this focused training. Everything has a purpose, right? And so, you know, for some athletes, like, man, like sometimes I just get out the door just to have fun. That's totally fine. Like have that be your easy days, your days where, hey, it's just a 30-minute shakeout run. Like that's totally fine. Those days are needed. I understand that. I agree with you 100%. But when you're actually doing those key workouts or you're in a build, it should have focus. And then if you start keeping track of this data, right, you're going to have this feedback that you can see daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. And then if you're in this for a long time, you can always come back and see, how did I progress in 2019? How did I progress in 2022? Man, I really, really did well at Leadville 2016. I'm going back in 2023. Like I want to try and replicate my base fitness, blah, blah, blah. You can have more insights to have a more focused approach and, you know, control the controllables, maximize your potential, explore perfection. There you go. That's why data is important. So best of luck in your upcoming events. Hopefully you start using data if you aren't already. I'm always happy to answer questions on the COROS Facebook user group about this if you guys really want to get more in depth with it, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have now as well.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Derek. I mean, there's definitely, I think as you kind of alluded to, like this can be a much deeper dive, and this, we're still kind of operating at some surface levels, but I think for me, some of the big takeaways are just having that record, even if you're not, accessing and using it right now, like start generating and creating that record, and then it's there and it's captured and it's available is super valuable. One of the questions that one of the participants had was relative to kind of the overall data in terms of like the rest and recovery side of things. Are your athletes, are they wearing their watches like all the time, like eating, sleeping, drinking, and so that resting heart rate is available and that recovery zones are captured? Or is it something like they just, because this person was just saying they just use their watch during their training and they take it off. So what were your thoughts? How, does that have to be worn all the time?
It doesn't have to be worn all the time. If you don't want to wear the watch all the time, you can just use it for your training. I would say though that if you don't mind wearing it all the time, you'll get more insights out of it. And one of the great things about COROS is we are always updating our firmwares and different technologies and pushing out to users. So as I'm not saying as daily metrics become more involved with potentially some of the insights that we might provide, I think you would get even more out of it. So right now, if you just wear it right now when you're not training, you would get your steps, your daily active calories, and your sleep patterns. But most of what I talked about just in the webinar is all from training. So, if you don't want to wear it all the time, you don't have to. Definitely wear it for training. But if you are going to wear it all the time, you will get more insights out of it.
Yeah. Here's another question for you. So, I mean, a big portion of our audience are females, and they have hormonal cycles that are part of their lived experience. And so how does that, for female users that are experiencing that monthly cycle, like how does that, which is a big draw on their body's energy, right? And vitality and recovery, how does COROS incorporate that data into the training process, recovery process?
So that data specifically is something that we're looking into to try and actually provide insights. I can't really give you a timeline on if it will come about, but I do know that we have had discussions about it internally to see if we can do anything with it. So, don't want to promise anything that we may not deliver, but that is very important. As for understanding, those cycles and those changes, I've coached a lot of female athletes over the years, and everybody's different, right? Everybody kind of goes through their cycle in slightly different ways. So what I would say of why the data is important for you personally is, if you always know, oh, I don't feel great on, day 2, day 4, whatever it is, like you can start to plan your training properly around that, so that you can offset those days in different areas throughout the week or month leading into it. So, you can still go for your overall goals, but you're also accommodating to your own personal needs. Right. So like that's part of the individualized approach. And, I talked about cadence and stride length and all this stuff, but life in general is an individual approach. Right. So like the females and their cycles or my wife just had our son 18 months ago and wow, what a change. Right. But, she's not like a crazy competitive runner, but she's done quite a few half marathons and she does track some data from time to time. So like we had something to fall back on for her to get back into it. And so having these things to fall back on through big life changes or just monthly life changes, like, I don't know, it provides you the plan back, or it provides you the plan to keep moving forward.
Yeah, what I'm hearing in that, and something that I've tried to do over the years is to try and, I have my watch and I'm collecting that data, and it's great that COROS or Strava or these other platforms have their different, data tracking mechanisms, but like journaling to kind of pair with that, I think is also really valuable, so that I can know like, oh, well, I look back at that data arc or that graph. It's like, well, I mean, I was sick that week, or I was traveling, or, that's when my kid was really sick. And like, so sometimes, we want to see these perfect graphs and these perfect trend lines, but I think journaling and pairing that with our data is a great reminder of like, life happens, and, to not just honor that process for sure. So
Absolutely. And I guess I focused 100% on the objective data in the webinar, right? There is a ton of subjective qualitative data. And so in the Training Hub, you can write comments and notes on your workouts. And we're launching something relatively soon that will make that even easier. To like, it will pop up and you'll know instantly I was sick that week, or hey, I just had a baby that week.
Turns out that happens. Hey, quick question for Derek. Do you mind making me the host real fast? I want to bring in Andrew, who's landed, and I'm guessing he might have some questions for you too, as the coach, that we've been working with throughout this process.
Yep.
Cool. Boom, 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 boom. Andrew, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself so you can weigh in on this. Oh, hey, I think it's happening.
I think we're there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So
I don't see you, but I hear you. I know you're beautiful. So
I would like to welcome everyone back.
oh, you're literally landing.
yeah, I'm trying to give you some visual here. Sorry.
Okay. Are there any other questions that folks have for Derek while we've got him? Or he's on East Coast time, so our hope is to kind of cut him loose and then dedicate the. I'm going to mute you real fast, Andrew, because you've got some airplane back noise. Dun, 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 dun. Mute. Okay, there you go. So just, if people have any other questions, they can drop it in the Q&A for Derek. I want to make sure that he's able to get his rest and recovery. But while we've got him, are there any other questions that folks have? All right. Derek, I don't see any other questions coming in.
All right, cool. 9:50 here. I'm gonna go sleep.
Well, can I ask you? I know you spent a lot of time talking about COROS, and I respect that. You're definitely you're working for them and are invested in their energies and their products, and I like I said, I've been really happy with my COROS watch. But I am curious, just for other people who are tuning in, like, what would you say? So maybe they don't have a COROS watch, but they're using Strava, or they're using moves counts, or they're using some other thing. Just kind of curious what you would sort of, as a general analytics trend, how well does some of this information, convert to other platforms, in terms of, analyzing a person's metrics?
Yeah, I think Strava has, I don't use Strava a ton, but I'm almost positive they have a chart similar to Base Fitness that shows kind of your form or your fatigue or whatnot. To be honest with you, I before COROS, I used Training Peaks a lot. So that's like a paid coaching athlete platform, which, it's a solid platform. So, if you listen to me for 40 minutes and like you found it interesting at all, like you owe it to yourself to find a platform that, whether it's COROS or not, that you can track this data on, because you will get better insights and you will get better from it. So, Training Peaks, if it's not going to be COROS, Strava, they do have some, and you can track general trends. And maybe that's a great place to start for a lot of runners, is because it's, it'll give you a good general idea of what's going on. But when you're ready for that next step, especially that pace zone distribution or those time and zones, you're going to have to get on a dedicated platform. Yeah. But there's, I talked about COROS a lot, but we have, there's probably 4 to 6 good options out there.
That captures a lot of that key metrics. So I guess, I mean, just because we've got folks turning in using different devices and platforms, and
Yeah.
you know, just I just want to just honor the fact that, again, you know, that there's ways to kind of get access to tracking those metrics. So
Yeah, fine. All right. Figure out what the terminology is for your daily stress, right? Is it training stress score, Training Peaks? Is it training load, COROS? Is it what does Strava use, Abram? Do you know?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't coach through that platform. Every platform has their own because everybody trademarks everything and gets a patent now. So figure out what your daily stress indicator is. And that's the first thing that I would figure out what number that means. And then what's the chart that shows kind of your longer, like the average of that number over, you know, like 42 to 3 months, 42 days to 3 months or whatever it is. And just start tracking your trend lines. And if your line is flat, you've been doing the same thing for a long time and you have to change it up somehow.
Cool. Let's see if we can get Andrew in on this before. Andrew, are you with us?
Yeah, can you hear me there?
Yes, and not the stewardess, only you.
Just wait, it'll come back. But while I have a moment of silence, I would say, you know, it would be good to have an hour upon hour webinar so I can refute multiple things that were said, but I'm just going to agree with all of it for now and say data is awesome.
I thought we could have a good discussion. Cool.
Thanks, Lynn.
Cool. Well, I think we should let Derek go. He's got a young kid and work tomorrow, and he's on East Coast time. Really appreciate the invitation to be tracking this data. And, you know, I think, again, you know, for me, one of the big takeaways is like, you know, having those trend lines are really valuable, you know, and then the granular work of personalizing that. I mean, I think that is a different level, you know, and I think that really requires a lot of time and investment, you know, from each individual, you know, in relationship with a coach, getting really familiar with the training program. But yeah, thank you, Derek. Thank you, COROS, for tuning in. And we'll switch gears here now.
Thanks. Well, I appreciate it, guys. It's been a pleasure, and you guys are doing awesome stuff. We will be in touch, and yeah, thanks, guys.
All right. Take care, Derek.
Right. See ya.
Awesome. Okay, Andrew, are you able to join in?
Yeah, absolute.
Okay.
I'll turn on video in just a second. I'm just about to be in a better place, so we'll just keep rolling out of respect to people's time here.
Totally. Well, I guess, you know, I kind of wanted to like making the transition here. This is really, we cut our presenter out and we did not end the webinar, so that's a win. The next section here that we'd like to do is just open it up for people to be able to, any questions they've got about where they're at in the training plan that Andrew put together. You know, we're getting dangerously close to the kickoff of the Aspire season. Our first trips are happening next month on Susha, and then in June we're going to be down in California in the Lost Coast, and like summer's coming and these vents are coming down. So as people have been putting in their miles, and you know, this is really a chance to have direct access to Andrew. Any questions that folks have for him about their experience they'd like to touch base on. All right.
Crickets, huh?
Well, I don't know. We'll give people a moment.
Sorry. I'm excited.
Dun, 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 dun. How about this? I'll start with this question for you, Andrew. Just give us your gut response to Derek's presentation. Do you have any leading comments without getting too, I don't know, what are your thoughts?
I like a lot of what was said. I think the notion of coaching the athlete first, the person first, and then kind of the data second, is one of the themes that I heard, which I really, really like. And all the pillars that he kind of touched on, I think those pillars are consistent throughout the literature and throughout what you would see on Training Peaks, which is where a lot of data and platforms are derived from is the CTL and the ATL and some things that are metrics that can give us a snapshot. But golly, I think it's just turning up and down dials for the most part, you know? So I like how he touched on various things as it relates to the data. But I like also that you mentioned, let me go video here. Go on video.
We'll take it.
Trying anyway. Give me just 1 second. I think I'm trying to do video. Let's try that again. Unable to access camera. Allow Zoom to access your camera. Oh golly, I've got to do it in settings. I'm sorry, guys. So I'm gonna respond to, you know, Abe, you mentioned journaling and kind of the qualitative, like how we're feeling. I'm pretty big on rated perceived exertion, obviously. And my one apprehension with any time that we take a deep dive into data too narrow in our lens is that it can, for the right or wrong personality, lead to burnout because we're perseverating on numbers. And for most of us, and I tend to be consistent with what I like to say is we want to do this stuff forever. We want to feel accomplished, healthy, and have fun. And that's at the brass tacks. That's kind of where it lives, I think, for a lot of people. And so repeatability is huge. And so my one dovetail to that great talk, and I do think it was a really, really, really good talk, is that you just kind of want to also stay in tune with how things are feeling and why you're doing it, and repeatability. You know, if it starts to weigh on you, then just that's where journaling comes in, or some qualitative check-in with your psyche, right? Like I always say, like I like to write a little bit, but I'm usually writing while I'm running. My head is clear. I'm thinking. Doesn't mean you don't do hard workouts, but I think some level of mindfulness to balance out raw data is a good thing, is my point.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's interesting, you know, that I see too, just in, and I think there's a lot of different, you know, considerations, you know, and I guess over the years I've become more interested in collecting my toolbox and not necessarily, you know, using one tool for everything, you know. And I think, you know, I really appreciate, you know, as we think about the different periods of the training process, you know, I'll look at my runs and I'll look at like, oh, hey, was I mostly in zone 1, zone 2? Because I know like I'm in a base building phase. Like that's really important to me. You know, how often am I actually looking at my watch when I'm out on a trail run? You know, it's like, it's really infrequently, you know. It's kind of funny, actually, just like a couple of weeks ago, I started doing my first track workouts ever. I was like, oh, this is kind of curious. I've never done this before. But I think the variability, you know, and like, you know, looking at, you know, kind of all of, you know, I think the variability is great. And I think the strength training is like having a holistic plan is hard to sometimes translate into that granular data that we're getting. And so I think, you know, having the data, having a holistic plan, having, you know, the journaling quality, all these pieces together, you know, give me, you know, I think a more comprehensive picture of where I'm at. So.
Yeah, I love the concept of that the whole specificity conversation, and how people within the training plan that folks are following along that we started with, that specificity is going up. We're working pretty hard right now. And so you're, you know, I think, yeah, it can be broad view or narrow view, I think is what I come away from that talk thinking.
All right, well, let's give it over to folks. Are there folks that people have, you know, other questions that they have for Andrew, the author of our preseason training program? Because the Q&A, you could drop them in the Q&A or drop them in the chat. All right, cool. I'm not seeing anything come in. That means you must have written a perfect plan, Andrew. I'll interpret the data any way I want. Cool.
Indeed.
Well, I really appreciate people who took a bit of their Sunday evening to tune in. You know, like I just love the training community as just a collection of like tools that we're putting at people. And you know, this is a lifelong practice, and you know, And data is a part of that. So hopefully you've taken, some pieces away of that and think about it. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording and thank everybody for a great evening. So we can maybe kick it around, Andrew, for a little bit if you like, and just hang out.
Yep.
But
Sounds good.
I'm going to hit stop on the recording so no one has to witness all of that. Thanks, folks, for tuning in.